if you get a kid to love literature, to love stories, to have that rich imagination, that's going to drive them into pushing their decoding skills and fluency and attentiveness and concentration.
Hello, and welcome to the Arts of Language podcast with Andrew Pudewa, founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, or as many like to say, IEW. My name is Julie Walker, and I'm honored to serve Andrew and IEW as the Chief Marketing Officer. Our goal is to equip teachers and teaching parents with methods and materials which will aid them in training their students to become confident and competent communicators and thinkers. Well, Andrew, happy April.
It is. And my birthday month as well.
It is.
And, you know, April showers bring May flowers and all of that.
Yes, and it actually happens here in Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, most everywhere except, I don't know, maybe the desert of Arizona.
Well, in Southern California, which is where both you and I grew up,
that's
there was not a lot of seasonal change. So April for us is an opportunity for us to think about what you talk about in your talk, Nurturing Competent Communicators. And one of the phrases that you use, and I know it's not original to you, but I love this phrase, this idea of furnishing the mind. And in fact, we spent a whole year talking about furnishing the mind and how you can do it in different avenues. And so this year's theme, of course, is how to think, but I love this idea of how it builds on each other.
Well, and we had the Bacon quote, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reading maketh a full man, conference a ready man, writing an exact man. So that idea of full, ready, and exact. So this is the get full part.
Well, Andrew, you and I have a good friend who we invited to be on our podcast today, who is very much about reading out loud. And that friend, of course, is Sarah Mackenzie. Sarah, welcome to our podcast.
Oh my goodness. I'm so happy to be here. I had not heard that quote by Bacon before, Andrew. And I love this idea of getting full on books. What a fabulous imagery. I love it.
Yes. Well, you know, you and I have shared this ongoing conversation about the tremendous impact of books, literature, auditory input to build the vocabulary, build the syntax, build the literary sensitivity, the poetic sensitivity. And the more I'm at this business of teaching the writing, the more I am absolutely sure that the product, the output, really depends on the input. And the quality of inputs is just phenomenally important. And I think so many children these days are growing up with really low-level, inadequate language inputs on a daily basis, the kind of drivel and junk that comes to them through screens and speakers. And so I am overjoyed to say that you have managed to do something that I never thought I could and haven't yet, which is to bring this concept of the incredible importance and value to the larger world, way outside of homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
And you're reaching so many dozens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And so I am tremendously grateful. I will confess that from time to time, I get envious about your numbers. But then I remember, well, I was your first podcast guest.
You were.
And
you were.
It's fun now, you know, I actually go out and I still do travel around a lot and meet people. And I am meeting people who said, I heard about you from Sarah Mackenzie podcast.
I love that. I love that.
Which is so fun because when I reached out to you for that first podcast, I actually didn't have a podcast yet. I had the idea for a podcast. And Julie's quick, yes, Andrew would love to come talk to you. I thought, oh, I guess I better figure out how to actually start this podcast. And I remember thinking, well, I mean, I'll reach out and see if he'll come talk to me. But this is Andrew Pudewa. I'm sure.
Now it's going to be people are like, Andrew Pudewa had Sarah Mackenzie on his podcast. I mean, that's like, you know, Donald Trump or something, Anyway, much more pleasant, I'm sure. Anyway, I wanted to have you, because we have history. People can go look at our episodes. And, we had so much fun the year we did the 10 best questions we ever got, and we shared the platform at the Great Homeschool Conventions and all that. You're not doing conventions this year. And one of those reasons, I think, is because you have undertaken to start a children's book publishing company. And
Yes.
You told me a little bit about your motivation for doing that, but I'd like you to tell our listeners, what caused you to go from, hey, I've got Read Aloud Revival, I've got Teaching from Rest, the Read Aloud family, I get to travel around and speak at conventions, and everybody loves that. But what caused you to flip over into really almost a different, and in many ways, I would think, more challenging business, publishing children's literature? What was the story there?
Yeah, the learning curve at Waxwing, which is the name of the boutique children's publishing house, is definitely the steepest learning curve I've yet encountered as far as this kind of work goes. But really what it was is that at Read Aloud Revival, we talked to so many different families constantly. We're recommending books. We're hearing from families about the books that are impacting them. You're the one who taught me, in fact, about the incredible impact that simply sharing a story with your kids, a book with your kids, can have for years and years. These are memories your kids will keep with them. All that good language you're putting into their ear, like you said, comes out later in their writing and their speaking and their communication. But even going a step further, the connections that we make in our families is so unique compared to all the other things that our families are doing, the ways that our families are interacting, especially right now in this like tech digital age. It's just a unique opportunity to really connect on a meaningful level with our kids. So we would talk with families about this, and I would meet families at conventions, and we'd recommend books at Read Aloud Revival. But I kept finding myself feeling like it was a little bit too difficult to find the kind of books that I knew families were looking for. And at the same time, I had written a few picture books, and I had an agent, and that agent was sending those manuscripts around to publishers, and they just weren't interested. They would give me this very similar feedback of like, this is too classic. That was an insult, by the way, just to be clear. I always thought, well, I mean, I'll take it, but nobody wants these kind of books. And I felt like that's not true. I'm pretty sure, based on all the conversations I've had with these families, particularly homeschooling families, that we're looking for a certain kind of book that we're having a harder, it shouldn't be this difficult to find them. So we just set out to start making them. And that was, as is true with almost every endeavor in my life, much harder than I thought it would be when I set out and got some bright idea. It was like, you know what? We'll do it ourselves. But it has been a special joy and challenge to be on. I feel like I get the privilege of being able to sometimes write books. Most of the books we're publishing at Waxwing now are not written by me, but the first few were. Write books and then recommend books at Read Aloud Revival, discuss books with families and help them find great books at Read Aloud Revival, and then make books, which is like the only thing I'm not doing now is running a bookstore. I feel like that's the only piece of the puzzle and the book publishing business that I haven't taken on yet.
We'll see. Sarah, it's so easy now and I know you have this on your website, which of course we'll put all these links in our show notes. But on your website, there's just a really easy link to a couple bookstores. Why do fulfillment when you've got these ginormous stores doing this for you? And I just want to insert this because I'm not sure where else this is going to come up. I love the tool that you have on your readaloudrevival.com website where it says, what kind of book do you want? Who is this for? And I've used that tool many times for my own grandchildren. And a recent story I can share, Sarah, is that I got the book Cora and the Crocodile or Crocodile and the Cora. Oh my goodness. My 7-year-old granddaughter could not put that book down. She's a pretty good reader, and she just would read that. Andrew, I did that trick that you talk about where I started reading the book to her out loud. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry, honey. I do not have time to read the rest of it. I'm just going to put this here by your nightstand, and I'll try and come and read this, next time we tuck you into bed. And no way, she just read that book herself. It was great. Yeah, love it.
Brilliant. I love that trick. I did that same thing with my now 19-year-old son when he was just getting comfortable reading on his own, like where it was not just a complete slog. Every sound was not a complete slog. And I remember, I think I did it with, gosh, what is the Nate the Great? That's what it was. And I would read just the very beginning and then just leave it out and be like, oh, darn, I've got to make dinner. I'll come make some time for this later. But especially if you leave it on a nice little cliffhanger, they just can't help themselves.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And parents are so happy when the kid moves from, no, I don't want to try to read this on my own, to, this is so interesting, I have to force myself to this next level of challenge. And, it can happen at all different ages, but that little moment of breakthrough that we can facilitate, I'm sure you've heard this, but actually, two of my sons-in-law have said to me, I'm worried. My boys, my son, they don't like to read. They just want to listen to audiobooks. They want, my wife to read to them all day. I'm worried if we do that, maybe they'll never be willing to read. And they have this fear, like somehow a love of audio is going to prevent them from becoming a kid who likes reading or an adult who loves reading. And so, I assured them, no, it's actually the opposite. If you just get a kid to love literature, to love stories, to have that rich imagination, that's going to drive them into pushing their decoding skills and fluency and attentiveness and concentration and all that. So it's almost like the opposite. The more they love literature, they get through the ear, the more they will love reading when they're older and teenagers. And of course, you and I have both seen this. Kids are uninterested at 8, 9, 10, even 11, but by 15, all they want to do is read good and great books. So
yeah, yes, that's true. And I think because of that, the musicality of the language becomes so familiar to them. I know with my oldest son, who was my latest reader, it's like he went from reading the Nate the Great type of ability to longer, more complicated novels almost overnight on a dime when he was older than I wanted him to be, of course, because at the time I was managing my own anxiety about whether or not this kid was going to be able to read well and wanted to read well. And what was I doing wrong?
Yep.
And really what happened, though, is because in the meantime, he listened to hours and hours and hours and hours of audiobooks. I mean, Redwall on repeat. I was reading aloud all the time. He had all that language just in himself. And so then by the time, he gets older, reading is, they can hear it inside themselves. It's like you've created the perfect storm for them to become readers. But I do think a lot of the challenge is just in managing our own anxiety about it not happening on a timeline that would make us feel like we were doing a good job.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you are an ally with me in the anti-anxiety league out there, just helping all these younger parents realize it's going to happen when it's going to happen. You can't force it to happen at any particular time or age, but you can prepare the soil. And the soil, of course, is the language and the imagination. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot, and of course the schools are having a really hard time with reading comprehension. There's a thing called, I don't know if you've heard this, but in the public world, there's this thing called the fourth grade cliff. Like, they can get kids reading and decoding decently up to, third grade level, but when they hit fourth grade level, comprehension just tanks. And it's a universal problem. And so everybody's trying to figure out why this is true. And I think one reason is that they're now reading things that have words they don't encounter in daily life, just hanging out with parents, living at home, watching YouTubes or whatever they do. And so now they're reading a word, they might be able to figure out what the word is and pronounce it or say it. But if they don't already know that word, then they can't really read it. They're not comprehending it. And you get too many words like that, you don't understand the sentence. You get too much like that, and you say, well, I don't like this. I don't understand it. It's boring. Goodbye. And that's where I really see, your work in reaching out to the general public, not homeschooled moms.
Well, homeschool moms and private schools.
But getting everybody, getting all parents to understand that reading aloud to kids, that is absolutely the foundation for comprehension skills down the line.
That's right. There's a really, to me, it feels like I can't think of anything else we can do in 15 minutes that costs nothing, that gets us all of the benefits. I know that Jim Trelease said this in the Read Aloud Handbook. He said if we could put in a pill the benefits of reading aloud, parents would spend enormous amounts of money and stand in long lines to get it. It's almost like we feel like it's too simple, it's too accessible to make that big of an impact. And it's actually really enjoyable to read aloud with our kids as well. And we have this idea, Joy Clarkson talks about this in her book, Aggressively Happy, as a tiny Puritan. We all have this tiny Puritan inside of us that's like, if it's too enjoyable, we should be suspicious, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's true in homeschooling especially, but just in parenting in general. If something is enjoyable, kind of easy, and doesn't cost anything, we're like, well, this can't really make that big of a difference, right?
Yeah.
But it does.
I do want to be sure that you tell us about the titles that you have published. I know we started with, is it Because of Barbara?
Yeah, the first book we actually came out with was A Little More Beautiful, the story of
A
a
Little More
garden.
Beautiful. Yeah. Oh,
Yep.
That was just magnificent. When you handed me that and I opened it, my heart just exploded. And I want to say something about your books, and then I want you to just tell everybody what you've got and what's in the pipeline.
Yeah.
But I've been talking a lot recently about the importance of very beautiful, high-quality illustrations to help build children's imagination connecting with the words. So when kids are listening to the text, they're getting some kind of images in their mind from the word. And they will look at the picture, in a completely unconscious way, compare what they are kind of imagining with what the picture is. And if it matches up, then they have this confidence and happiness, like, yeah, I understand this.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't match up, then they are kind of uneasy, like, well, how come what I'm imagining is not what the picture is? And they may have to recalibrate their understanding of the language according to the image. And so the images have to be very, very good for the children to do that well. And I am just incensed with children's books that have distorted or misplaced or disconnected pictures on the pages. And your books, if there's anything that would be obvious to the first person, to anyone who just gave it a first look, would be, these are beautiful illustrations. So talk a little bit about that. Tell us what came after that first book and what your plans are.
Yeah, what you're speaking to, I think, is that uneasiness we feel when there's a dissonance between like beauty of language and the beauty of what we're looking at. And of course, if we're trying to present beauty in a way to our children that helps order their soul and helps them see, like part of what we're doing as parents and educators is helping our kids learn to love what they ought. And in order to do that, we have to show them rightly ordered beauty. And that is one of my biggest frustrations with children's publishing in general, is that when there's almost a sense of disrespect for the child as a born person, right? As an image of God, certainly, when we give them illustrations that are ugly, slapdash. Here's the thing. We have this opportunity right now, I feel like, to put art gallery style quality art into the laps of our children. I just imagine like Laura Ingalls Wilder. There's in one of her books, she talks about this big green animal book, and how it was like the book that their family had, right? And she would pour over it. And I think to myself, man, if Laura Ingalls could have had the picture book library that my kids have, it would have been like, we have these riches, and yet we still continue to put these ugly, graphic, distorted images in front of our children instead of true beauty. And then we take our kids to an art museum where they have to, maybe people take their kids to an art museum where they stare at beautiful art on the walls, and we have the opportunity to put it in their lap every day. So we take this very seriously at Waxwing, this idea of rightly ordered beauty, of resonance rather than dissonance in our kids getting beautiful language through their ear and also into their eyes as they're looking at images. And we have been so fortunate to work with some astoundingly skilled and talented illustrators. So the first book, A Little More Beautiful, that was the hardest one to make just because it was the first. And I was intent when we created Waxwing that I wanted to make the kind of picture books that you have on your shelf that when your kids grow older and you start pairing things off, people would go, not that one, keep that one for the grandkids. Like that one has to stay. That's how I feel about my Robert McCloskey books and about my Tommy DePaola books.
Yes.
Yep. Definitely is. In fact, I may have to buy more just because, all the kids and their grandkids, I mean, it could go exponential. So that would be good for you, I guess.
Yeah, keep doing that, please. Yes.
And then the next one was kind of different.
The next one is While Everyone is Sleeping. And this one is like a lyrical bedtime story illustrated by Gabrielle Grimard. When I saw her depiction of the shrew, which is the main character who goes out on this midnight adventure and finds a garden where there are moonflowers that truly do only open at night. I saw her image of the shrew and her, nighttime ball with all these insects dancing and thought, oh yes, she has to be the one to illustrate this book. So that one actually has surprised us by winning more awards than any other books in our lineup. That's been really fun. It's gotten some recent attention just by winning a lot of different independent book awards. And then I wrote Because Barbara, which is the story of Barbara Cooney, who's one of my all-time favorite illustrators. She's passed now, but she was a mother of 4. And I was so interested in how I heard her kids talk about the way that she had this vibrancy and zest for life. And then in her illustrations, her whole goal was to get that beauty that she saw in the world onto the page. And I think she did it. She did it with Miss Rumphius, with The Oxcart Man, with Roxaboxen, and a lot of the books that I felt like were my very favorite picture books. So I thought, I want to know the woman who did this. Who is she? And then wrote that book, which was illustrated by Eileen Ray and Ewan, who ended up going out to Damascotta, Maine, and sitting at Barbara Cooney's oldest son's kitchen table and pouring through photo albums and getting all the details right so we could make it as true as possible. And then we just released one of my own favorite releases is Dear Duck, Please Come. That was my favorite to write. This was easily the most fun I've ever had writing a sentence in my entire life. But every sentence of this book was just a joy. And it's the story of a duck who checks his mailbox in the morning and finds a letter from Rabbit saying, Dear Duck, please come. I lost my tooth. And Duck knows that a good friend thing to do is to help your friend find something that's lost. And so he collects a band of friends through the meadow and the Piney Glen as they look high and low for this tooth with a surprise ending that I will not spoil. But Charles Santoso's illustrations have me howling. One of the fun things in this book is that he hid teeth all throughout the illustrations. So there's bushes that are shaped like teeth and clouds that are shaped like teeth. So it's really fun for kids to go back through and see how many teeth they can find. I actually don't know how many there are total.
I love that, Sarah. Like little Easter eggs, right?
Yeah.
That is so
and
fun.
Children are so attentive to, and it cultivates attentiveness when they know there's details to find. It's really good for their intellectual growth to be looking and reaching out for those kind of things. And then your newest book, Painting Wonder?
Yes, Painting Wonder is a book written and illustrated by Katie Ray Schoen, who's a debut author illustrator. And this one, it tells the story of how Pauline Baynes illustrated the worlds of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. So Pauline Baynes is the woman who's behind those iconic Narnia illustrations that most of us can see. If I was to say, a fawn and Lucy under an umbrella, we're all thinking of the same image, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and we probably have a very similar image in our mind, the lamppost or the White Witch on her sleigh. The illustrations of Narnia are embedded in so many of us from our own childhood and as we've passed those Chronicles of Narnia to our own kids. And it never even occurred to me, who was the illustrator who made those images until I saw what Katie has done with this book. And it tells the story of Pauline Baynes, the illustrator of those books, and how her own struggles in her childhood, and then how she was discovered by first Tolkien and then Lewis, and illustrated those worlds that have become such a part culturally of who we are as readers and Christians. And
I would think the author illustrator of these books about other illustrators, you must feel a tremendous weight to say, I'm going to illustrate a book about the life of a great illustrator.
It's
wow.
a really unique challenge because
Yeah.
they don't ever want to completely copy the style of that illustrator,
Of course
but you
not,
do
yeah.
want to kind of
Do
hint
justice
at
to
it.
it. Yeah.
Yes. So it presents a unique challenge. Katie was definitely up for it. This is our most highly anticipated book. So here's kind of some fun news that I don't think I even told you yet, Andrew. This book, brand new, hitting shelves 6 weeks before it even came out, sold through its entire first print run and went on a big back order. So we were like, oh, we did not order enough of these books because I think the reason is because there really is that internal like love for Narnia. Those of us who were raised on Narnia, and so as soon as we see the illustrations, we're like, oh my goodness, that's my childhood. And that's what we see. And we want to pass that on to our kids. And I mean, Katie did an astounding job with this book.
Well, and Sarah, this morning when we were preparing for this podcast, I walked into Andrew's office and saw this on his table. And it just is so beautiful. Just to have this on your coffee table would bring beauty to your room. It's just a gorgeous book.
Do you remember, Sarah, when we first had a conversation, you were going to publish the first book, and I said, print way more than you think you'll need. And that was my advice to you. And I'm so happy for you and your family and all the good that you've brought into so many families' lives. And I'm going to miss you terribly on the convention circuit this year.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to try to channel my inner Sarah Mackenzie enthusiasm and remind people that you are still there in spirit, although you're very busy doing the important work that you are doing.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Sarah,
thank you so much.
We are out of time. It just always goes so fast when we have someone on our podcast as delightful as you. But do share with our listeners where they can find you, where they can see these beautiful books, and just give us a little bit more of how we can reach out to you and your podcast.
Yes, absolutely. So the Read Aloud Revival podcast is probably the best place to start. If you're new to Read Aloud Revival, you can just find it wherever you listen to this podcast. And we have great book list recommendations at readaloudrevival.com. And whenever we pick books for our book list, we sort of choose them for their read aloud ability specifically. And also one of the things we sort of pride ourselves on is keeping our lists short enough that almost any book you choose from one of those lists is a pretty sure winner. I just know, as a mother of 6 myself, I know how frustrating it is to like get all the ducks in the row that you need to get sitting down and read aloud to your kids, and then to start reading aloud something that's a dud or not interesting or a slog or difficult to read aloud or has inappropriate content. And you just think, I don't have time for this. Or I worked way too hard to get here. How is this? So we are really mindful of that strain on parents' time. And so making those book list selections as, I'm trying to find the right word.
Wholesome?
Yes. And so that no matter what you pick, there's likely to be a winner on those lists. The books we're making are all found at waxwingbooks.com. And we have quite the lineup coming. So we are hard at work trying to fill your kids' shelves with the best books we can make. And it's so much fun.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. This is as good as life could be at this moment, unless you were actually sitting in the room with me and we could go have lunch. But we'll do it again sometime, I'm sure.
Yes, can't wait.
And keep us posted, and we'll keep our listeners posted. And God bless you.
Thank you so much. You know, IEW, and especially that talk you mentioned at the beginning, Julie, Nurturing Competent Communicators, was pivotal for me in my relationship with my kids, in my relationship with reading aloud. And so I'm your biggest cheerleader. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, please subscribe to our podcast in iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify. Or just visit us each week at iew.com/podcasts. Here you can also find show notes and relevant links from today's broadcast. One last thing. Would you mind going to iTunes to rate and review our podcast? This really helps other smart, caring listeners like you find us. Thanks so much.